Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing part 129 of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. We take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making and use them to talk about some of the wonderful biodiversity that we share our world with. So today we've got a few assortment of birds and a few extinct mammals and a couple of, got again extinct mammal and extinct reptiles. So very excited to get stuck into this one. So we're going to be starting off with some mods by Great Cake Mods. A recent mod on the scene that's really done awesome. We're going to have a look at first the white-throated toucan. So the white-throated toucan is a near passerine bird from the toucan family, or Rhamphocidae. These guys are found in South America, throughout the Amazon basin, and throughout the Toucans and Aragua River basins, found in hot, humid forests and things like that. So first described by Linnaeus in 1758 under the bionomial Rhamphopus toucanus. But there actually is some subspecies recognized. So there's the red-billed toucan, which is this nominate subspecies, which I believe this one is. The Cuvier's toucan, which was described as a separate species as well, and the Incan toucan also. So the red bill is found in southeastern Venezuela, the Guianas, and northern Brazil. The Cuvier's toucan is found in the Amazon from western Venezuela to northern Bolivia, and the Incan toucan is found from northern and central Bolivia. So they're all described as originally all different species, but the Handbooks of the Bird of the World treats the red-billed toucan as a separate species, as the previous one, but all three taxa were all considered different species, but now they're considered interbreed. They interbreed so much, and they think they don't warrant species status, so they're not considered subspecies. Though some sort of still consider the eco ones kind of a staple hybrid populations, and other two subspecies, which is interesting. But like other toucans you can see here, their white throat is brightly marked, and they have that quite large bill. So they have a total length of 50 to 61 centimeters, about 19 to 24 inches, with his body weight being somewhat variable. So for adult birds being between 425 to 180 grams, so it's been 0.9 to 1.8 pounds. And the males on average are slightly larger, at about 642 grams, or about 1.4 pounds, and the females average about 580, or about 1.28 pounds. However, the subspecies, the Cuvier's one, gets a little bit bigger on average, depending on these guys, so about 702 grams, or 1.5 pounds, and 608 grams, or about 1.5 pounds, typically on average for the Cuvier's. So the only species of toucan that actually surpasses one is the Tura toucan, which though the Cuvier's subspecies may actually get harder than a Torco toucan, which is interesting. And you can see they got that black plumage with that white throat going on, and a white throat and a breast bordered below with a narrow red line, kind of that as well. There's a bare skin above the eye is blue, and the beak has a yellow tip, as you can kind of see going on. Let's see if you will open up for us. So the yellow tip. So this is the female. Let's talk about the different colors. It's not what we wanted to have a look at. Anyway, this is the male. So this is the male colors. So the bill in the mainly black is juveniles typically have shorter bills. Let's have a look at these little guys. You can see the juveniles have those shorter bills. And the adults, you can see they've got a bright yellow rump with that red stripe behind them. That's not what I wanted. Have a look at you over here. Yeah, I don't know what's up with them today. And all that. So the rest of the bill is mainly black with reddish brown and toucanus. So toucanus is the red-billed toucan. So that's what one of them is based on as well. And the mix with males are being larger and longer billed than the females, but otherwise the sexes are alike. And the white-throated toucan is virtually identical to the channel-billed toucan, but there's some minor differences. So in terms of their behavior, they form small flocks, or more commonly found in pairs that move throughout the forest in a heavy, rather weak, undulating flight, fewer than 100 meters at a time. And they're primarily arboreal, so fruit eaters, so they typically eat fruit, but they'll also eat insects, lizards, eggs, and small birds. So in terms of their breeding, they laid about 2 to 4 white eggs that are laid in a cavity under a decayed section of living tree, like in an old woodpecker's nest or in a dead tree. Both sexes will incubate the eggs for about 14 to 15 days, and the toucan chicks remain in the nest after hatching. They are blind and naked when they are at birth, and they have short bills, but they also have specialized pads on their heels to protect them from the rough floor of the nest. And they're fed by parents and typically fledge at about 6 weeks of age, and the parents continue to feed them for several weeks after they lived in their nest. And in terms of people keeping them, they are sometimes kept as pets, but because they are noisy and they're often common kept with other species, it's illegal to take them out of their wild. But because they're such fruit eaters, they can be very difficult to cap, and they're also noisy as well. In terms of their status, the IUCN follows the Handbook of Birds of Word taxonomy, so they've assessed the Cuviers differently. Were considered vulnerable. Now they're considered least concern, and this is primarily the threat of the deforestation of the Amazon basin, but also the pet trade and hunting pressures has kind of also been an issue for these guys as well. Even though they are considered least concern, just because they're popular doesn't mean they are not at risk of extinction. So you can see that's the males and females there. Look how pretty these guys are. Yeah, as you see the red bill going on there. So this is a male, and this is a female as well. I think. That's another, yeah, so I mean, just with variations, different subspecies. So the red bill one has the much more reddish bill. But anyway, that was done by Red Cake Mods. Did a really, really awesome job. Next up, we've got a more famous toucan. If you've seen the stereotypical toucan, this is the species. This is, that's a juvenile. Let's have a look at the adult. So this is the Keel-billed toucan, or Ramphtophis sulcularis, also known as the keel toucan or the rainbow-billed toucan. So these are a colorful Latin American member of the toucan family and the national bird of Belize. And there are two subspecies recognized. There's one that's found in the southeastern Mexico, Belize, and northern Guatemala, and the other one's found sometimes as a considered different species, found in southeastern Guatemala to northern Cambodia and Venezuela. So in terms of their description, these guys range from about 42 to 55 centimeters, or about 17 to 22 inches, a little bit smaller than the white-throated toucans. You can see they're large and they have a colourful bill that averages between 12 and 15 centimetres, or about 4.9 to 5.9 inches, which is about 1/3 of its body length. They typically weigh between 380 and 500 grams, or about 13 to 18 ounces. And while their bills, most toucans, they have very big bills that may seem large and cumbersome, it's actually covered in spongy hollow bone covered in keratin. So it's very light but also very hard, so that enables them to be much more able to fly and much less cumbersome. You can also see the plumage of the toucan, keel-billed toucan, is mainly black and with a yellow neck and chest, with molting occurring once a year, like most birds. They have blue feet, as you can see as well, that are also zygdactyl, so they have 2 feet going forwards and 2 going backwards, very similar to a lot of parrots, so that allows them to climb very well and allows them to stay on branches and jump. And they also have red feathers, you can see on the tip of their tail. And the bill, as you can see, is mainly green, with like an orange sides and a red tip, which is pretty cool. In terms of distribution habitat, they can be found from southern Mexico and found into Venezuela and Colombia, where they roost in canopies and sometimes tropical and subtropical, even lowland forests, up to altitudes about 1,900 meters, where they will roost in holes in trees along with other toucan species. They can be very cramped, so they can tuck their tails and beaks under their bodies to maintain a normal body temperature while sleeping. And adding to the lack of space, the bottommost can be often covered in pits of the fruit that the toucans have been eating. So very much like many toucans, they're very social birds, are rarely seen alone, though a little bit more common than other species. They fly in small flocks, about 6 to 12, through lowland forests, where they have slow undulating flights with rapid beat patterns as well, and then glide with the bird's beak extended forward and dipping throughout the rest of the bird. So their feet are also drawn up in flight as well, and their flight distances are typically short, less than 100 meters. And while they live together in groups, they often share cramped living quarters in the holes of trees, and there's a family structure, and birds will often duel each other with their bills or throw fruit into each other's mouths, which is quite interesting. So in terms of breeding, well, I've looked at this kitty. In terms of breeding, they will lay between 1 to 4 white eggs in a natural or already made tree cavity, and the male and female will take turns incubating the eggs. The eggs will hatch approximately about 5 to 20 days after they're laid, and after hatching, the male and female again take turns feeding the chicks. And when the chicks have hatched, they have no feathers and their eyes closed from approximately 3 weeks. And they also have heel pads, as I mentioned, that assist with the pit-covered nests as well. So that's another thing as well, very similar to other toucans. And the chicks will stay in their nest for about 8 to 9 weeks until their beaks or their bills fully develop and they're ready to fledge. And in terms of diet, very similar to other toucans, they eat a lot of fruits, a wide range of fruits, and then they eat also eggs, insects, nestlings, and lizards. And their bill is actually surprisingly dexterous. That allows them to utilize a large variety of fruits that might otherwise be reached, so it allows them to carve out a niche. And when eating the fruit, they use their bill to dissect the fruit and then tosses it head to its head and then swallows it whole. And they can be found in captivity, sometimes kept because of their high fruit diet, they can be very hard to keep in captivity. And in terms of their status, these guys are considered threatened by habitat loss, which has been accelerating, and hunting and trapping for the pet trade. And they have been considered going through a moderately rapid decline in population, so that's why they're considered near threatened. But that's why it's considered near threatened, because of those declines. But yeah, a little bit sad, but another great cake mod. Did a really good job. So next up, we've got our last great cake mod for this episode, I believe. Yep. So we're going to have a look at another bird. We've got here the Hyacinth Macaw. So the Hyacinth Macaw is a parrot that's native to Central and Southeastern South America, Eastern South America. So very, very interesting animal. So they're one of the one probably extinct species of the South American macaw, Androdronicus, if you would say that. Androdronicus. So were described as their own thing. They were first described by ornithologist John Latham in 1790 as Psittacus enceladus, but it was actually put as his own genus as well, eventually. And in terms of description, they are the largest parrot in the world, second only to the kakapo in terms of weight, but they are the largest flying one in the world by length. So they get to about 1 meter, or about 3 inches from the tip of the tail to the top of its head, and weighs about 1.2 to 1.7 kilograms, or about 2 pounds 10 ounces, or 3 pounds 12 ounces. And you can see each wing's about 28 to 42 centimeters, and they are, as I mentioned, they are the largest type of parrot, other than the kakapo, in terms of length. In terms of weight, kakapos are the biggest. They get about 3.5 kilograms. In terms of their feathers, they're pretty much almost entirely blue, except they've got their bare, obviously, feet as well, with the zygodactyl feet to be able to catch, able to climb. And they've also got their bare beak, and they have a little bit of yellow around their eyes and the bottom of their beak there. So that's what they have as well, but they can be sometimes slightly grey. In terms of ecology, these guys mostly nest in Mangabey trees, which rely on the Toucan toucan for its distribution, and they also feed on 33% of the hyacinth macaw's eggs as well. And eggs of these guys are regularly preyed upon by corvids, such as jays and crows, opossums, skunks, and coyotes as well. And the Toucan toucan eats a lot of their babies as well. In terms of their food and feeding, the majority of the hyacinth's diet is nuts from specific palm trees, typically from Bovacava and Akuri trees, where they have these very strong beaks that are able to break in nuts. And they're actually able to break through coconuts, which is really, really interesting. The large Brazil nuts as well, they can break through with their beaks. They've got very, very strong beaks. And these nuts are so hard that they cannot feed them until they've passed the digestive system cattle of some of these, like the Akuri nut. And in addition, they'll eat fruits and other vegetable matter as well, but they don't really like a lot of nuts and things like that. But they have the really big beak that's well adapted for it. One thing as well, the macadamia nuts is a really common thing, is like in Australia, native to Australia, a really good food source for hyacinth as well. And they're one of the only birds that can actually break it apart. So they're very, very strong jaws. In terms of tool use, limited tool use has been seen in macaws, hyacinth macaws as well. So they'll incorporate wood, chewed leaf or pieces of wood to often get these items to feeding on harder nuts. So they actually will allow the nuts to remain in position while they gnaw on it. So they're able to use that behavior as well. So that's really cool. And in terms of reproduction, we're going to look at the cute little babies. Look at how cute these little guys are. Little fledglings. So nesting will typically take place between July and December, with nests in tree cavities or cliff faces, depending on the habitat. And they mainly depend on the toucan for that livelihood, as the toucan actually gives birth to a lot of them. Well, not gives birth, but eats a lot of the seeds of the plants that these guys like to eat. So it's a very important relationship between the toucan species and the hyacinth macaw. And the toucans, like the Mangabey trees, often spread by toucans. which is what's important. And hollows of sufficient size are only found in trees that are 60 years and older, and it's quite fierce competition to find a hole to nest in. Existing holes are enlarged and then partially filled by wood chips, and they'll typically have a clutch size of 1 to 2 eggs, or typically only one fledgling survives. And as the second egg will hatch several days after the first, and they cannot compete. So they'll also a macaw will lay more eggs that are normally fledged to compensate for earlier eggs that they failed hashbones do not survive. So they will lay more eggs when they feel like when their baby dies. They just have another chance. The incubation period lasts about a month, and the mate will tends to his mate while she incubates. The chicks will then leave the nest or fledge at about 110 days of age and remain dependent on their parents until about 6 months of age, and they will mature and begin breeding at about 70 years old. 7 years old, but they can live up to like 60, 70 years old. So as I mentioned, they are the longest, and they tend to be very even temperament in terms of macaws and big parrots. So they're considered gentle giants, and they have specific needs, as I mentioned, because of the specific nuts they eat. So they have some specific kind of sensitivities, so they've got to be careful with them in terms of captivity. And as I mentioned, habitat, they can be found in 3 main areas in South America, in the Pantanal region of Brazil, adjacent Bolivia and Uruguay, and those kind of places. And over the last few decades, they've kind of like declined, or actually grown a bit, but the range has declined, but their numbers have declined. And there's evidence of populations growing. The Hyacinth macaw has also accidentally been released in Florida, but there's no evidence of a population persisting. And they typically, in terms of the habitat, they prefer semi-open woodlands or somewhat wooded habitats. Usually avoid dense humid forests and regions in those habitats. And they can be found on the edge or relatively open sections, and can be found in like savanna grasslands, tri-thorn grasslands, things like that, and a lot around these pines as well. In terms of conservation, they are assessed as vulnerable. So the population is estimated to be about 3,000 individuals, with a range between 2,500 to 5,000. The estimated captive population is believed to be equal to slightly more than that in 1998. And the announced each year, there's estimated to be about 10,000 birds taken from the wild, and the wild population has increased into the 1980s. It's about 6,500, so they have increased, which is good. And they're protected under law, which is good as well. But the threat to these guys is mainly due to habitat loss or being altered due to cattle ranching and things like that. And also dams is a big thing as well. And also, because generally they're most threatened as well, other things, habitat destruction, shooting, and also catching for babies. Genetic variability is also a thing. There may be a lot of issues with inbreeding with macaws just because of a lot of genetics, because a lot of them will be taking out. But luckily, there's been lots of steps to protect macaws. They have done. There've been concerns with the status of wild populations, and they don't breed that well in captivity. Since hand-bred hyacinth macaws have often been demonstrated to have a higher mortality rate, which is a little bit sad. So typically now they're banned, and other conservation actions have been proposed, including making their study of the current range, more protections, things like that. And there's lots of long-term projects to try and protect these guys, which is good. But as I mentioned, they're considered vulnerable. There's still a lot of them, but and they're pretty stable, but that could change very quickly because it's just no more than a few thousand macaws, these macaws. And in terms of aviculture or people keeping them, they are sometimes kept as a companion bird, but because they're so large, they require a lot of space, exercise, and a really big, like custom-built stainless steel cage that they can't break through, as they can break through most conventional kind of parrot cages. And the size of macaw, like most parrots, have a natural inclination to chew on objects. That's a big thing as well. And they can often be very expensive, about $10,000 for a macaw. And they should not be permanently kept indoors as well. And they're often described as gentle, so they're very big, but they're gentle. But they can, as I mentioned, have a very strong bite. And they can learn to talk, but they're not as gifted with phrases and things as other species. And also very long-lived. They can live up to 50 years in captivity. Generally, like most macaws, are very long-lived. Yeah, really, really awesome. I love talking about hyacinth macaws. They're such beautiful animals. I love hyacinth. Probably my favorite of the macaws. But yeah, that was another one done by Great Cake Mods. Did a wonderful job. So next up, we have got Paleosaniwa, done by Scott. So if you guys know the game Saurian, you'll be familiar with these guys. So Paleosaniwa is an extinct genus carnivorous lizard from the late Cretaceous, and his name was given by Charles Whitney Gilmore in 1928, which means Ancient Saniwa of Canada. So these guys typically were quite comparable in size to a large monitor lizard, with a snout to vent length of about 85 centimeters, and a head to body length of about 1 to 2 meters, or about 1 to 3. So in total length about 3 to 6 feet, typically. And they're actually among the largest terrestrial lizards during the Mesozoic. So these guys lived in the late Cretaceous. And there are some specimens that have shown that these guys have skulls of up to 15 centimeters, which is comparable to like 1.6 meter young Komodo dragons. And very similar to Komodo dragons, they would have had blade-like teeth with minute serrations that have been used for seizing prey. And so just they fed on larger vertebrates as well. So they would have fed potentially on young dinosaurs, which is a really, really interesting fact as well. And adult Paleosaniwa would have been large enough to prey on most avialans and mammalians and mammals of the time of the late Cretaceous. So as I mentioned, lived in Hell Creek. So this guy would have potentially eat baby T-Rex and small non-avian dinosaurs like the small allosaur that lived in Hell Creek, and then eggs of juveniles of like T-Rex, Triceratops, things like that. So Paleosaniwa was originally described from, or Paleosaniwa canadensis, the full species name, was originally described from the Lake Campanian of Alberta, and was then also found more recently in the Lake Campanian of Montana, and in the late Maastrichtian, so right at the end of the Cretaceous, of Montana and Wyoming, where it's typically known from isolated teeth and vertebrae, but two partial skeletons have also been found. And the type species P. canadensis is from Alberta, and while the Maastrichtian Paleosaniwa has been traditionally referred to as canadensis, there's a 10 million year difference, so it's very likely that they could be different species, but the available fossils of the Maastrichtian one are just too incomplete to formally describe a species. But yeah, that's another really interesting thing about them. So another really interesting thing about them as well is their relationships. So they're a member of the group Platonidae, which includes monitor lizards and Gila monsters. So monitor lizards, Varanidae, and the Gila monsters and Heterotromidae. And what was originally thought to just be a Cretaceous varanid, they've also been interpretation as a relative of the Gila monsters. So another interpretation is interpreted them as a giant Gila monster. And the most recent analysis put them outside either Varanidae or Hematomidae as a stem member of the Vanoroidea, so potentially. So a really early relative of monitor lizards and things like that, and Hematomidae. With its affinities being poorly understood, but it's actually maybe related to lots of other types of North American carnivorous lizards, so it's not in its own group. And it makes sense also since varanids are mostly... Oh, is it New World varanids? Yeah, I'm pretty sure there is. But yeah, really, really cool. Look at these guys. So yeah, very, very awesome Paleosaniwa. So really nice to see these guys. And look at the babies. Look at these cute little guys. Definitely a really nice mod, and I love that people, like especially Scott. Scott likes to take animals that often people do draw in paleo art as, oh, we're just a giant Gila monster, or short-faced bear, you know, it's just like a giant, or Procoptodon is a giant kangaroo. Things like, as I mentioned, Arctodus is just a giant grizzly bear, a giant spectacle bear. But actually tries to make their own distinct colors and looks to them, which I really, really love. And definitely really cool. Definitely a big fan of that. So Scott deserves it. And Scott's got a couple other mods coming up in a couple of other episodes. I really do love lots of Scott's mods. And he really tries to make those extinct animals really feel distinct and not just a giant version of their modern relatives. But anyway, we got another one coming up. So next one was done by Leaf and Neck. So this is another Takin, but this is not one of your subspecies. You've already covered all the subspecies. This is the Ethiopian Takin. So this is an extinct species, which is really cool. So this is one of the, there's a couple of extinct species of Takin. There's one from China, and this one is from Ethiopia. So this is the Ethiopian Takin. So this Takin is from the Pliocene of Ethiopia, about 3 million years ago, and its remains is found in the Harder Formation. So this shows that a lot of actually Asian animals lived in Africa during the time, as we'll get into, and we'll talk about the Harder Formation as well, just a little bit of excuse to talk about them. But the genus Boudicaris, which includes the modern Takin and the extinct Ethiopian Takin, which is Boudicaris churchelli, which is interesting, and the species was named in honor of the Canadian paleontologist C.S. Rufus Churcher, which is Churchy, I believe you say that, and it was named by Alan Gertie in 1996. Really, really awesome animals. So we're going to talk about the Harder Formation. So the Harder Formation, back in prehistory in Ethiopia, dates back to about, I believe, about 3 million years ago. It's in the Rift Valley. dates back 3.4 to 2.9 billion years ago, and is actually quite important in terms of human evolution. So we have a lot of early relatives as well in this animals of this formation. A lot of early relatives of modern antelopes. So we have like an ancient Impala. We have, as mentioned, Budokara, the extinct Takin. Early relatives, a lot of the modern antelope, ancient gazelles, ancient oryx, ancient antelopes, ancient hartebeests, things like that. Even ancient Cape buffalo. And then we also have giraffes as well, and Shivatherium, hippopotamus, and Hexaprodon, which is another extinct relative of the pygmy hippo. Also Coptocorus, which was a really large extinct pig. Also, we have a canid, that's like a raccoon dog. We have Dinofelis and Homotherium found in this area as well as Megatherium. An ancient mongoose, also Hyenidae. So Champsotheres, which is the hunting hyena, or is it also called the running hyena? Extinct relatives of hyenas. The hyena itself, a close relative of the striped hyena. Also Encarnodon, which is a giant river otter, but also has been interpreted now as like a giant badger. And in terms of proboscideans, we have Dinotherium, Elephas as well. So we had Asian elephant relatives in Africa, Loxodonta, and so modern age African elephants. Relatives of extinct subspecies of modern African elephants. Extinct mammoths and Paleoloxodon were found there as well. Extinct horses, so an extinct like relative of the Heparine horses. So that would be, I believe, equines, which is pretty interesting. We also have extinct rhinos, relatives of white and black rhinos. The Therapithecus, which is an extinct relative of the Gelada baboons, and some other relatives of like colobus monkeys and baboons and things like that. And we have Lucy, comes from this formation, Australopithecus afarensis, which is an extinct relative to us. And also lots of rodents that are related to modern day rodents, such as porcupines, things like that. Also lots of different birds, like ancient ostriches, also ancient haranhingas as well. Also, in terms of reptiles, we have crocodiles and pythons and varanids. So a very filled out formation. And what I really like as well, this really interesting mod, they've actually given the Gelada colors to the Takin, so give them a little bit distinct. So you can see the male's got like a dark bit on his chest. We'll try and move him so we get a good look at it. So, you can see there. See, look, he's got a dark bit on his chest, just like a Gelada. So he's basically, even if you look at the Zoopedia, let's have a look at the Zoopedia. So the excuse was we only made this to put a cool Gelada skin on Takin, which is pretty cool. Really, really awesome. But yeah, another cool extinct species that we get covered. We've got a couple of those now. So, next up, we have got the coloured Mangabey. This was done by Lorby. So this is another really interesting animal. So these guys are called a red-capped Mangabey, or white-collared Mangabey. These guys are a species of Old World monkey and the Pseudopitheridae, and it was originally excluded at the Soti Marabi as a subspecies, but is considered monotypic. So you can see these guys are covered in grey fur, but their common name refers to the names of the head and necks, so they look like they've got a collar going on. They've got this red cap on as well, and this white collar that gives them that cap name. And their ears are black, and they've got these white eyelids, which are also really interesting, which sometimes refer to them as the four-eyed monkey, because they look like they got glasses going on. And in terms of their tail, they've got a dark grey tail that extends past their body with like a white tip. And they have long molars and very large incisors. And their average body size for a captive one is typically between 9 to 10 kilograms or 20 to 22 pounds for males, and about 7.5 to 8.6 or 17 to 19 pounds for females. With a head to body length about 47 to 67 centimeters, or about 19 to 26 inches, and 45 to 50 centimeters, or 18 to 24 inches. So in terms of the habitat, these guys are typically found in coastal swamps, mangroves and valley forests from western Nigeria, south into Cameroon, and throughout Equatorial Guinea and Gabon, and around the Atlantic shore, which is quite interesting. And they live in large groups of up to 10 to 35 individuals. That includes several males. They also use a lot of verbal communication. So they use cackles and barks to keep the group in contact with each other and signal their positions to other groups. They also have a diet that's typically of fruits and seeds, but also will eat leaves and foliage, flowers and vertebrates, dung, mushrooms and gum. So they have a very varied diet. And they often have no defined breeding season, and they reach sexual maturity about 5 to 7 years old and have a gestation period of about 170 days. And in terms of threats, in 2006, it's actually estimated that annually about 3,000 collared marabis are taken for the bushmeat trade, and this has made them considered endangered by the IUCN, along with habitat loss and people cutting down trees, of course. So this has made them an endangered species, but luckily, well, we don't know too much about them, but luckily there are protections and stuff in place to help make sure that they're okay. They're considered Appendix 2 by the IUCN or the CITES to protect them. So yeah, another really, really cool one. So, last but certainly not least, we've got everyone's favorite American canid that's not a wolf. We've got the Coyote. So, a really nice side to talk about this one. This is done by Leaf, Nuto, and Imissus. So, these guys are a species of canid found only in North America and is a smaller relative of the wolf and is slightly smaller than the eastern and red wolf, where they fill the same kind of niche as golden jackals do in Eurasia. So in terms of their description, they weigh between, on average, 8 to 20 kilograms on average for males, and females weigh between 17 to 18 or 15 to 40. The body size will generally vary between subspecies/populations, with populations living more north will be larger, or more southern ones tend to be smaller, just because of the Bergsman's rule. So in cooler areas, they will get bigger. In terms of average body length, they get about 1 to 1.3 meters, or about 3 to 4 feet in length, comprising of a short 40 centimeter tail. And the largest record of a male wolf was found near Wyoming at about 1.5 meters or 4'11" and weighed about 34 kilograms, with scent glands that also laked at the underside of the tail, upper side of the tail. They also have a bit of variation in their coat. They have a primarily grey or red coat, but sometimes where they live in more desert areas, they'll be more whitish grey, and some areas it just kind of fits the habitats. And generally, they have like a sable coat colour with a dark colour as well, and a subcaudal gland with a white facial disc as well. And they also are typically smaller than those wolves, than a grey wolf, but they have a longer ears and much larger brain case. Also a much thinner face, so that's the easiest way to kind of tell them apart, which is really cool. And also another way to tell them apart from just wild dogs is that they have a more elongated, less rounded face. So in terms of history, so by the time we colonized the Americas, the European colonization, they were largely confined to open plains and regions, things like that. And the early post-Columbian show that these guys, the writer was describing, are often difficult, so we can't really find too much about them. But in terms of their evolution, they are believed to be a descendant of the Canis. So the Canis genus dated from a scion, obviously about 6 million years ago. And typically, by the Pliocene, the Canis lithobus, which was actually found in the early Pleistocene, and sea latins came to existence about 1 million years ago, which is the modern species of coyote. So C. latins is related as well to C. edwardi, which is an extinct species of kind of like an ancient population of coyotes. There's also another species called C. leptophagus, which was very similar to modern coyotes in weight, but had shorter limb bones and were a little bit less cursorial. And also a more primordial form of Canis than the grey wolf, which is quite interesting as well. And the oldest fossils of modern coyotes is found about 0.74 to 0.85 million years ago, so about 750 to 850,000 years ago in Virginia, Hamilton Cave in West Virginia. And there's also the Pleistocene coyotes, which were larger and more robust than modern coyotes, and they probably went extinct during the Ice Age because most big things do. But Pleistocene coyotes were unable to exploit that big game hunting niche that was left with the extinction of the direwolf, or Icyon, and then that was filled by grey wolves, so they kind of sticked around and stayed smaller. And in terms of DNA evidence, we do have a pretty good idea of what they're closely related to today. They are early relative between the African wolf and the coyote, which is also quite, and the other coyote, the grey wolf. So we know what they're related to. And there's about 19 different subspecies described, mainly based on just geographical variation, like coat color and size and things like that. So most likely they are considered just different variations within the population. I wouldn't be surprised if there was no subspecies, or maybe just one or two. So that's just taxonomy being taxonomy. And they have been known to hybridize with domestic dogs, creating coy dogs, which are rare in the wild, but they did because they're mating with the dogs and coyotes do not coincide. and they do not actually survive that well. And only hybridization only happens when they're expanding the areas where there's few conspecifics, and dogs are the only alternatives. And they have low survival rates. So they don't do well with dogs, but they do a little bit better with wolves, and actually believed to be the eastern wolves and red wolves are believed to be ancestral hybridization events may have led to led to those species. And we do have evidence of them hybridizing with coyotes a lot. So it depends on who you ask whether it's the chicken or the egg in that regard. So it's potentially, of course, a lot of research into that. So the red wolf and the eastern wolf may have been hybrid populations where coyotes and wolves breed and then created that separate population. And some just consider them hybrids. It really depends on who you ask. Taxonomy on this group is very confusing sometimes. So in terms of their social behavior, like Eurasian, they're gregarious, but they're not as dependent on conspecifics. So not really a specialized hunter. So they typically will have a coyote pack, which is a family that has a reproductive female. However, unrelated coyotes may join the pack to kind of bring down prey that's larger, and these can often be temporary, and they even have bachelor males as well. Typically, copulation time with these guys lasts about 5 to 45 minutes, and they'll squabble as well. The females will fail to mate, will often assist their sisters and stuff with pups, and they'll often, newly marked pair typically will find a territory. Established territory and crust, they'll either construct their own dens or steal the dens from other animals such as badgers, skunks, or marmots. And during the pregnancy, the female will frequently hunt alone and bring back food to the female. The male will hunt and bring back food to the female. And the female may line her den with dry grass or with fur pulled from her belly. And these wolves are monogamous, so they are both been known to practice monogamous and bigamous relationships. But the coyote is strictly monogamous, so these guys are very much mate for life types, or they'll at least be together for their pack, which is really cool, even in areas with high coyote densities and abundant food. So they are considered monogamous. Typically, the coyote pups are born in dens or hollow trees about 200 to 500 grams, where they're born artificial. So they're completely dependent on milk for the first 5 days, 10 days of their life. Their incisors will come out at 12 days, at the kinase at 16, until all their teeth kind of erupt at 21 days. And their eyes will open about 10 days as well, where they become partially mobile, and they'll start running at about the age of 6 weeks. And then the parents will begin supplementing the pup's diet with regurgitated, solid food, about 12 to 15 days. And so at the age of 4 to 6 weeks, their both teeth will come out, and then they'll be given small food items such as mice and rabbits and stuff in carcasses, where lactation will start to decrease. And unlike wolf pups, they actually begin serious fighting prior to engaging in play. So they'll kind of fight each other and then kind of start playing again, so then they'll groom each other. And the male will actually play an active role in grooming and feeding and guarding the pups, but abandons the females goes missing before the pups are completely weaned. And the den is abandoned by June and July, and the pups will follow the parents patrolling. And pups may leave their family in August, that they can remain for much longer, and they'll attain their adult dimensions at about 8 months and gain adult weight about a month later. So they're very interesting, very monogamous wolves, coyotes, which is interesting. So in terms of their territorial and sheltering behaviors, these guys also maintain a territory that's about between 0.4 to 62 kilometers, or about 0.15 to 24 square miles, where they have it depends on food availability, but they'll have lots of den sites, hopefully, and lots of food and not a lot of competition from other predators. And they do not actually defend these territories outside of the denning season, and are much less aggressive towards intruders than wolves are, and typically will only chase and scare them away. And they will usually mark them by peeing and stuff. They will use ground scratching or razor leg urination. And like wolves, coyote use a den. They use the deserted holes, things like that. So they like that. The dens can be located in canyons, things like that, banks and things. And they'll often even use abandoned homesteads, railway tracks, hollowed logs, things like that, which is quite cool. So in terms of their hunting and feeding behavior, these guys are very good smell, and they've been known to hunt large prey in small groups, so they'll eat ungulates. They'll typically will eat mouse-sized prey, they jump on them like squirrels. They've also been observed killing porcupines and things as well, and they'll even had a mutualistic hunting relationship with badgers. So the badgers will actually follow the coyote because they're much faster. The coyote will sniff them out, and then the badger will dig it out, and then whoever's lucky will get that little rodent, which is interesting as well. So they've also been observed killing porcupines as in pairs, as they flip the rodent and then attack its soft underbelly, Typically, only old and experienced coyotes will try this as well, but so typically older ones. Also, they'll jump. Success in killing large ungulates depends on depth as well and strong, so very varied diet. They have all sorts of vocalizations as well, being both gregarious and solitary. They have a lot of vocal repertoires that is not as complex as wolves, but more complex than foxes. So they'll have play bows and play leaps, and also lots of other things and spins and dives to be able to communicate with each other, and lots of vocalizations. And they've been described as the most vocal of all North American mammals. And they also been called the barking dog, so they make all sorts of different vocalizations, such as growls and yelps and whines and things like that, as a greeting song. So, in terms of their habitat, prior to their near extermination of wolf coyotes, these guys were most numerous in grasslands that inhabited by bison, elk, and pronghorn. So they did well on grasslands, and they were home at semi-arid areas or deserts. So they did quite well in most habitats, very adaptable. In terms of diet, they're ecologically equivalent of the jackal. So these guys are primarily carnivorous, but they're highly versatile. They'll feed on bison as carrion. They'll also feed on lots of deer and stuff as carrion, and maybe as large packs they'll hunt them. But by themselves, they'll eat smaller animals such as rodents, hares, birds, uh, especially like roadrunners and young water birds and galliforms. Also amphibians, except toads, lizards, snakes, turtles, tortoises, crustaceans, fish, and insects. And they'll often may pick up prey by the target. So they typically eat a lot of shrews, moles, and rats that they'll do. And typically that's kind of food they'll eat. More unusual prey will be also like young bear cubs, harp seals, rattlesnakes. But more typical prey can be ground squirrels, voles, rats, rabbits, mice, things like that, which is quite interesting as well. And working in packs, they have been known to take down prey more than 10 kilograms. So in some cases, there have been packs of coyotes that take down elk and cow and cow, elk, pronghorns, wild sheep as well, and even like domestic sheep and cattle. And they've been known to bring down animals that weigh up to 100, 200 kilograms. So it's quite interesting. And they're also quite frequent scavengers, so they'll feed on pretty much whatever they can find on as well. And they've even been known to cannibalize on the carcasses of other coyotes. And they have been known to eat a lot of fruit as well. So they feed on strawberries, blackberries, carrots, things like that. So they're very generous in that regard. And in coastal California, they have a high-based, a marine-based diet, which is thought to be because of the extinction of the grizzly bear in the region. And they've often been seen in Death Valley to eat a lot of hawk moths as well. In terms of competition, in the ranges where coyotes and grey wolves overlap, the interference competition and predation of wolves has been to limit their density. So typically where wolves are, there's less coyotes. And they also compete with cougars, especially around Nera Savada. They will compete for mule deer. And they also compete with bobcats and other things as well. In some cases, adult coyotes have been known to prey on black bears, grizzly bears. They've been preyed upon by black bears, grizzly bears, American alligators, larger lynx, and golden eagles. So they can be prey for them. But they also really hunt red foxes as well. And there have been some bobcats and things like that. So there's a lot of interesting relationships between America. So in terms of their range, they were typically found around the past 10,000 years. They typically were found in the typical US, but then they've actually been found to move up to like Canada, things like that, potentially because of climate change, but also because of extirpation of wolves. So they potentially, those both factors allowed them to go up to higher areas and up to the kind of Alaska and things like that, and even down to Costa Rica. So their range has been expanding. And they're actually predicted to appear in Belize in the near future. But their range has been growing, which is interesting as well. And in terms of relationship with humans, there's lots of folklore and stuff like that, especially with Native American, and there's been a lot of attacks on humans as well. They're usually rare, but they can cause severe injuries because they're small size, but there have been attacks reported. And they've also prey on livestock, and people like hunting them, also furs, uses, and people have tried taming them. Especially with hybrids, but they tend to not do too well. But they can be trained enough to like retrieve and pointing, which is quite interesting. But yeah, the range of them, as I mentioned, they are a wide range and quite abundant. They are considered at least concerned with the ISN, though some local populations are impacted by wolves and other competition with animals. But their range is actually expanding. So their pre-Columbian range was limited to the southwest and plains region of North America and the northern central parts of New Mexico. But by the 19th century, they've expanded largely because of the extinction or extirpation of wolves in a lot of the southern US and up into Canada as well. So they've managed to move up to a lot of Canada and into Alaska as well. and they're widely believed to be recent immigrants to southern Mexico and Central America. Through the deforestation as well, they've been able to spread down as well. So because of humans, they've basically actually done better because they've got rid of the competition and have been clearing the habitat since they like open areas for these guys. But yeah, really, really awesome. Look at these cute little babies. We've had a little look at these guys. Another really nice mod. I know there's been a couple Coyotes mod, but it's nice to get a bit of variety in. This one's especially the latest one. So, yeah, I think this is a great place to end the video. So, thank you everyone for making these mods. You know, Great Cake Mods, Scott, Leaf, and Nick, and Lorby, Nuto, Leaf, and Ismissus. They've all done a wonderful job. So, yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified of learning things. So, yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video, hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.